The lights went out all at once. A wall of darkness swallowed the arena, and for a single suspended heartbeat, 50,000 people held their breath. Then boom! A single white spotlight pierced the dark. The bass line hit like a pulse through the floor, rattling the seats, shaking the air. Smoke exploded across the stage in silver bursts. A shadow appeared in the mist, familiar, poised, magnetic. The crowd erupted. It wasn't cheering anymore. It was something primal, a collective roar that seemed to bend the metal rafters overhead. People screamed his name until their throats burned, their hands thrust high, their tears illuminated by the strobe. Michael Jackson stepped out of the fog. He was dressed in black and gold, military cut, silver buckles flashing under the lights. His gloved hand rose slowly, almost ritualistically, and the crowd went insane. The sound was deafening, a wall of worship. But his face, if you looked closely, was calm, too calm. His eyes flicked across the crowd like a man memorizing something, trying to fix it in his mind forever. "Good evening, London," he said softly into Mike, and the roar doubled. From the rafters of the farthest nosebleed seat, every person stood, crying, filming, screaming. This was supposed to be it, the first night of a record-breaking comeback series. The This Is It tour, his redemption, his return. But in the first few minutes, something already felt different. The perfection was there, the dancing razor sharp, the voice smooth as liquid fire, but there was a stillness beneath it. Every movement looked a little heavier, every breath more deliberate. When he paused between verses, he wasn't catching his breath. He was listening. The crowd didn't notice. Not yet. They were swept away by the show, the pyrotechnics, the lasers, the sound that seemed to crack the sky itself. But the people closest to the stage, the diehards who had followed him across continents, felt something strange, an undercurrent. He wasn't performing to them tonight. He was performing for something else. Backstage, his crew watched on the monitors, their faces lit by screens showing different camera angles. The stage manager, Naomi Klein, a veteran of world tours, tilted her headset mic away for a second. "Is it me, or does he seem quieter tonight?" Her assistant frowned. "It's the new in-ear mix. Makes it sound softer." Naomi didn't look convinced. She'd worked with Michael long enough to know when he was improvising and when he was saying goodbye. On stage, he launched into Billie Jean. The lights hit him in rhythmic bursts. White, gold, white, gold. His shadow stretching across the smoke like a god made of rhythm. Every beat of his heel against the stage floor echoed like a thunderclap. The arena moved, thousands of bodies swaying as one, caught in the trance he'd cast 1,000 times before. But when the last note hit, Michael didn't strike his usual final pose. He just stood there, head bowed, glove glimmering faintly. The crowd, thinking it was part of the act, kept screaming. Cameras flashed. Dancers froze, waiting for his cue. But he didn't move. Then, slowly, he raised his head and whispered, "Let it fade." The band exchanged uncertain looks, but they obeyed. The music faded. The drums softened to silence. The lights dimmed until only a single beam of pale blue remained, illuminating him alone in the vast darkness. Michael stepped forward. His breathing was audible through the mic, steady, deliberate. His silhouette shimmered in the haze. He looked out over the audience like a man seeing a dream from the outside. Thousands of phone screens glowed back at him, tiny constellations of devotion. "This," he began softly, his voice barely audible. The mic caught only fragments. "You've given me so much." People in the front row stopped filming. They sensed it, the shift from performance to something else, something unguarded. He took a deep breath, then smiled faintly. "I want you to listen." The stadium went still. It was as if someone had turned the entire world's volume knob to 0. Even the camera crews froze. "This is not goodbye," he said. "It's a thank you." The crowd began to murmur, half awe, half confusion. Michael's expression softened, almost peaceful. His voice trembled, fragile but resolute. "When you hear the music stop," he paused, eyes glistening, "listen anyway. You'll still hear me." He looked down at the stage for a moment, then back to the crowd. "Always." Then he took a step back from the mic. The band leader, unsure whether to continue, whispered through his earpiece, "Michael, next song cue?" No answer. Michael lowered his head, resting both hands on the microphone. The crowd leaned in, thousands holding up phones to capture the moment. He whispered something, just a few words, so quietly that even those in the front row couldn't make it out. His lips moved slowly, deliberately. A single tear slid down his cheek. Then the lights cut to black. For 5 long seconds, there was nothing. No music, no movement, no sound. Just a faint echo of breath and heartbeat. When the house lights returned, the stage was empty. The dancers stood frozen at their marks. The mic still stood center stage, faintly swinging, its stand trembling from where he had just released it. At first, people cheered, assuming it was a dramatic ending. But as the seconds stretched into a minute, confusion replaced excitement. "Is that it?" someone shouted. "Encore," another cried. But the lights never came back up. The stage remained dark. Then came the announcement over the speakers, flat and emotionless. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for attending. Please exit the arena safely." The crowd erupted again, but this time in disbelief. No one understood what they'd just seen. Backstage, Naomi ripped off her headset and pushed through a tangle of crew members. "Where is he?" "Left the stage right after blackout," someone said. "Didn't go to dressing room. Went out to service corridor." "What?" She ran toward the corridor, heart hammering. The sound of the crowd's confusion echoed through the concrete halls. She turned a corner and saw him, Michael, walking slowly down the hall, his jacket half unbuttoned, his gloves still on, his head bowed. He looked peaceful. "Michael," she called. He turned, gave her a tired smile. "They listened," he said softly. "Listen to what?" she asked. He didn't answer. He just touched her arm lightly, like a man saying goodbye without words, and continued walking until the hallway swallowed him in shadow. Naomi stood there for a long time, trying to understand what she'd just witnessed. She replayed his whisper in her mind, over and over, but she couldn't recall the words, only the feeling they carried. The next morning, social media exploded with theories. Some said he'd whispered, "I love you." Others claimed it was "remember me." A few swore it was a message in another language entirely. But no one agreed. The only thing everyone knew for certain was that it didn't sound like a farewell. It sounded like a message, something meant to be understood later. And as night turned to morning, one line began appearing everywhere, from fan forums to news tickers to walls outside the O2 Arena itself. "When you hear the music stop, listen anyway." No one knew if those were his exact words, but they felt true. And for the first time in his career, Michael Jackson had left an audience completely silent. If you're enjoying this story, please subscribe to support the channel. The morning after the concert, London woke up to a strange kind of quiet. The city's heartbeat, the endless hum of buses, chatter, and morning rush, felt muffled. Newspapers still dripped with headlines about Michael Jackson's triumphant return, but there was something else buried beneath the celebration, something unsettled. In every cafe, every living room, every glowing phone screen across the city, people were replaying the same clip from the night before, the moment the music stopped. The video spread faster than any tabloid could print. Millions watched as Michael stood in the spotlight, whispered something inaudible, and vanished into darkness. No one could agree on what he'd said. Some heard, "I'm free now." Others swore it was "love never dies." A few claimed he said a child's name, too soft to be sure. But everyone felt it. The pause, the stillness, the weight of something left unsaid. Naomi Klein hadn't slept. She sat in her hotel room, still wearing her stage badge, her coffee untouched on the table. The TV flickered silently. Another news segment, looping grainy footage from the show. She rubbed her temples, whispering to herself, "It wasn't planned. I know it wasn't." Her phone buzzed again. It was the stage producer, Miles. "You saw it too, right?" he said. "Of course I did. I checked the show log. There's no cue for a fade out, no blackout, nothing. He just stopped. Did he say anything to you before going on?" Miles hesitated. "Yeah, just before he went up the ramp, He looked at me and said, "Make sure they can hear the silence." I thought he meant cut the noise between sets. Naomi sat back, staring at the wall. "No, Miles." He meant that silence. By mid-morning, journalists flooded the O2 press office. Theory spun like a storm. Was it exhaustion? A farewell? A health issue? A stunt? But in the corners of the internet, the tone was different. In fan forums, thousands wrote long, trembling posts about what they felt in that moment. People who'd never met each other described the same thing. How the silence after his whisper didn't feel empty. It felt alive. One fan wrote, "It was like he gave us something invisible." I don't know what he said, but I felt it, like he was saying goodbye without saying it. Another replied, "He wasn't saying goodbye. He was handing something over, like he wanted us to carry it." For the first time in his life, Michael Jackson's silence spoke louder than his music. That afternoon, Naomi met with a production crew at the venue. The stage still smelled of smoke and sweat, but was eerily empty now. No fans, no music, no magic. Just cables and ghosts. They gathered near the soundboard where every show had been recorded. "This is the master file." The engineer said, tapping the monitor. "Last night's concert. We have isolated tracks from every mic, including his." Naomi leaned in. "Can you play the last minute?" He nodded and hit play. The recording came alive through the studio monitors. The thunder of applause, the slowing music, Michael's final breaths amplified by the mic. Then came the whisper, barely audible, just the softest of consonants. "Boost that section," Naomi said. The engineer increased the gain. The sound deepened, still faint but clearer, a rhythm of words, heavy with breath and tremor. But before they could interpret it, the waveform spiked and cut out. "What the engineer muttered. "That's impossible. It just drops." Like the mic was unplugged mid-sentence. Naomi stared at the screen. The frozen waveform a silent monument to a mystery. "He didn't unplug it," she said. He finished. By evening, the footage had become world news. Every major outlet replayed the same 20 seconds on loop. CNN called it "The Whisper Heard Round the World." BBC dubbed it "The Final Message." Reporters hunted for eyewitnesses. Everyone had a version. A security guard claimed Michael looked up just before the blackout and mouthed "thank you." A dancer said he whispered, "It's all for love." A fan in the front row swore she heard him say, "I tried." No one could prove any of it. In Los Angeles, Michael's longtime friend and choreographer, Kenny Ortega, gave a quiet interview. He spoke slowly, carefully, like someone holding fragile glass. "He told me a few days before that show," Kenny said, "that this tour wasn't about proving himself anymore. He said, 'I just want to leave them with something that can't be turned off.' I didn't understand what he meant then." The interviewer leaned forward. "And now," Kenny's eyes watered, "now I think I do." He looked away, his voice breaking. He wasn't talking about the music. The world didn't know it yet, but that performance, his final complete show, would be his last. Within a week, headlines would scream the news of his sudden passing. But for now, the whisper was all people could think about. In homes across the globe, fans rewatched the moment again and again, trying to lip read. Some enhanced the audio with editing software. Others slowed the footage to a crawl. On YouTube, one comment appeared beneath a viral clip, written by a user calling themselves Mirrorman 2009. He didn't say it to us. He said it to someone else. Within hours, thousands liked the comment. Theories exploded. Who was he talking to? The audience? A band member? Someone unseen in the wings? Naomi was still at the venue when the crew began packing the last of the equipment. She lingered near the empty stage, unable to leave. The boards where he had danced still vibrated faintly in her memory. She climbed up, stood center stage, and looked out at the empty seats. The silence was vast. She whispered, "What did you say, Michael?" Her voice echoed off the walls. She could almost imagine him there, the faint smell of his cologne, the ghost of movement in the light haze still hanging in the air. She turned toward the microphone still standing there, faintly swinging as if remembering the final note. And then she noticed something barely visible under the edge of the stage matting, a folded piece of paper. Her breath caught. She crouched down, slid it free. The paper was wrinkled, slightly damp from the humidity. The ink smudged but legible, for words were written in his slanted handwriting. Let them hear love. Her hands trembled. She sank to her knees on the darkened stage, clutching the note. Around her, the empty arena felt infinite, and in that emptiness, she finally understood. The whisper wasn't a goodbye. It was a wish. That night, outside the O2, fans gathered again. Thousands stood under the London drizzle, holding candles and singing softly. No one told them to. No one organized it. It just happened. One by one, people stopped singing and lowered their candles. They bowed their heads in silence. For nearly 2 minutes, the city stood still. No music, no voice, just the echo of a whisper that no one could quite hear, but everyone could feel. And somewhere above that vast, quiet crowd, the big screens flickered, replaying that final image of him in the spotlight, head bowed, lips moving faintly before everything faded to black. People stared up through tears, as if waiting for the lights to come back on. They never did. But somehow, that silence became louder than any encore he'd ever given. It was as if the whole world finally understood what he had meant all along, that the greatest performance he ever gave was the one that ended with stillness. And in that stillness, the whisper kept breathing. The world moved on. At least it tried to. Months passed, and headlines shifted to the next spectacle, the next scandal. But for millions of people, that whisper never faded. It clung to them like unfinished music, haunting the edges of silence. And for Daniel Rios, it became an obsession. Daniel was a journalist, mid-30s, once a music critic for Rolling Stone. But he wasn't chasing fame anymore. He'd been there, in the crowd that night at the O2 Arena. Section 112, Row H. He'd felt it, that inexplicable stillness after the whisper, the way everyone froze, unsure whether to cheer or pray. He remembered thinking, that wasn't a show, that was a message. So when the documentary team behind this, as it released their final cut, glossy, beautiful, but carefully edited, Daniel fell hollow. The whisper wasn't in it, not the real version. They'd cut the moment short, fading to black before Michael spoke. And that omission became Daniel's purpose. He called it Project Whisper. It started as curiosity, then turned into devotion. Daniel spent his savings traveling to London, Los Angeles, and Las Vegas, interviewing anyone who had been there that night. Dancers, backup singers, sound engineers, even security guards. Each had a different version of the same truth. I saw him look straight into the wings before he whispered, said one of the dancers. Not at us, like he was talking to someone standing just off stage. The sound engineer claimed something stranger. We were recording every channel live, every mic, every instrument. But when we checked his feed afterward, there was a gap, like someone had spliced the recording mid-sentence. It's never happened before or since. And Naomi, now retired, agreed to meet him privately in a small cafe near Covent Garden. She looked tired but serene, like someone who had been carrying a secret too long. He knew it would be his last show, she said quietly. You can't fake that kind of peace. Daniel leaned in. You think he planned it? Naomi hesitated. Then she reached into her bag and slid a photo across the table, a scan of a note she'd found under the stage. Let them hear love. Daniel's breath caught. You still have it? The original's in the archives. They took it after the investigation, but I kept a copy. I thought, maybe one day someone would ask the right question. What question? Naomi smiled sadly. Not what he said, Daniel, but who he said it to, asterisk. Daniel left the cafe shaken. That night, he sat in his hotel room surrounded by piles of printouts, forum threads, photographs, witness statements. He played the concert footage on repeat, pausing on the final frame. Michael leaning toward the mic, lips moving, the lights bleeding into darkness. He played it again at half speed, then 1/4. He zoomed in, enhanced, adjusted exposure. For a split second, just before the blackout, Michael's eyes flicked toward the right edge of the stage. There was movement there, a small figure, barely visible, half hidden behind the speaker rig. A child. Daniel froze the frame and stared. The outline was faint but unmistakable. Thin arms, small frame, standing just within the light's reach. Over the next week, Daniel traced every rumor he could find about children at the show. There were hundreds, VIP guests, Make-A-Wish Foundations, local contest winners. But one name kept surfacing. Eli Matthews, age 8. Eli had been terminally ill with a rare heart condition. He'd met Michael briefly backstage through a foundation visit arranged just before the show. Daniel reached out to the organization. After weeks of emails, a woman finally agreed to speak. Her voice over phone was soft, but cautious. Yes, Eli was there. Michael insisted on meeting him. He even rearranged his schedule that night to make sure he could. Do you know what they talked about? Daniel asked. A pause. We were told not to share details. But Michael gave him something. Said it was a promise. A keepsake. Daniel's pulse quickened. What was it? I never saw. But Eli's mother said it was something small. She said when he came home, he told her, Michael said I have to listen when it's quiet. Daniel nearly dropped his pen. Listen when it's quiet. The same phrase that had echoed across the fan forums for years. A month later, Daniel flew to California to meet Eli's mother. Her name was Grace Matthews, a quiet woman who lived in a small coastal town outside Monterey. Her living room was simple. Family photos on the mantel, soft light filtering through lace curtains. On the wall hung a framed concert ticket from the O2 Arena. Grace spoke in a voice heavy with memory. Eli was so happy that night, she said. He didn't have much strength, but when Michael met him, it was like light came back into him. He kept saying, he looked right at me, Mom. Like he knew me. She reached for a small wooden box on the table and opened it. Inside lay a pair of white gloves, child-sized, and a folded piece of paper, yellow from age. This was in his jacket pocket after the concert, she said. We never told anyone. Daniel leaned forward. The paper was a concert program page, sign at the bottom. Eli, keep the rhythm alive, even when the music stops. Love, M. His throat tightened. Did you ever play him a recording from that night? He asked. Grace nodded slowly. Eli listened to it once. Just once. And he smiled. He said, that's when he said it to me. To you? Daniel repeated. No, she whispered. To him. Daniel left her home shaken to his core. The pieces were aligning in a way that made both perfect sense and impossible truth. That whisper, the one billions had obsessed over, hadn't been meant for the crowd. It had been a message for one child. A private gift hidden in plain sight. But Daniel wasn't done. He still needed proof. Something beyond hearsay and memory. Something concrete. Through contacts in the music industry, he tracked down Rick Alston, one of the digital archivists for Michael's estate. Rick was known for two things, his precision and his guilt. They met in a dim studio lined with reels and servers. Rick glanced around nervously. You can't quote me on this, he said. But yeah, there's a version of that show the public's never heard. The raw audio? Daniel asked. Rick nodded. Every mic was recorded separately, including Michael's personal feed, the one they muted in the official release. Daniel's pulse raced. Why mute it? Rick hesitated. Because it wasn't for us. He inserted a flash drive into the console, typing commands until a file name appeared on screen. Mike09_final_vox.wave. This is the untouched version, Rick said. No mastering. No edits. He hit play. At first, just static. Then, the murmur of the crowd. The thump of a heartbeat through the mic. A breath. And then, softly, unmistakably, Michael's voice. Tell them I tried to heal them. The room seemed to stop breathing. Rick swallowed hard. I shouldn't even have this file. It was supposed to be locked away. Daniel sat back, eyes wet, every nerve burning. For years, the world had argued over what he whispered, but now he knew. The whisper wasn't mystery. It was confession, and somehow, impossibly, it was love. Later that night, Daniel stood alone outside the studio. The city around him glowed with neon and noise, But in his head, there was only silence, and that whisper looping over and over. Tell them I try to heal them. He understood now why the recording had been buried. It wasn't a publicity moment. It was too raw, too human. It was the truth of a man the world had spent decades misunderstanding. Michael Jackson hadn't used his last words to glorify himself. He had used them to apologize, to reach across time and say the only thing he ever wanted the world to know, that everything, the music, the pain, the fame, had been for something purer, for healing. Daniel pressed record on his phone, speaking softly into the night. The whisper wasn't an ending, he said. It was a reminder that even after the lights go out, some songs never stop playing. He looked up at the stars, cold, bright, endless, and for the first time since that night at the O2, he didn't feel the silence pressing down. He felt it listening back. The night the world finally heard it, time seemed to stop. The broadcast began quietly. No fanfare, no countdowns, no booming announcer voice. Just a single image, Michael Jackson standing in the dim blue light of his final concert, frozen in that eternal pose, head bowed, microphone trembling between his hands. The documentary was called The Last Whisper and had been Daniel Rios's life for nearly 5 years. What started as an obsession had become a mission. He wasn't chasing headlines anymore. He was chasing closure. For the fans, for the people who loved him, for himself. Millions tuned in across every continent. In living rooms, bars, and cinemas, the screen glowed with the promise of revelation. Hashtags trended worldwide hours before it aired. Hashtag The Last Whisper. Hashtag MJ Final Message. Hashtag Tell Them I Healed Them. The first hour of the film was calm. Archival footage. Interviews with Naomi, the dancers, Grace Matthews, the production crew. But everyone was waiting for the same thing. The moment. The whisper. When the footage cut to that final song, Man in the Mirror, silence fell across the world. Even the air seemed to hold its breath. The concert lights flickered, sound swelling to the brink of breaking. Michael's voice soared, raw, pleading, almost prayer-like, if you want to make the world a better place, take a look at yourself and make that change. Then came that final beat. The cymbals faded. The lights dimmed. The band froze. On screen, Michael turned toward the crowd, and his whisper came through clear as crystal. Tell them I tried to heal them. The sound was soft, cracked with emotion, not the voice of a performer, but a man. The screen showed his lips moving, his eyes glistening. For the first time in history, the world could hear what he said, and no one was ready for how it felt. In living rooms from Tokyo to Toronto, people gasped. Some burst into tears without knowing why. Others fell completely silent. It wasn't a message to the crowd, or to the cameras, or to history. It was a confession whispered to the air itself, meant for whoever cared enough to still listen. In the broadcast studio, Daniel watched from the control room, every muscle tight. He'd heard those words 100 times in the editing bay. But tonight, they felt different, alive, bigger than the speakers that carried them. Naomi sat beside him, her hand pressed to her mouth. When the whisper echoed through the monitors, she broke. Silent tears spilled down her face. He really said it, she whispered. He really said it. Daniel nodded, unable to speak. The footage continued. Michael's silhouette faded into black. The crowd in the recording erupted. Not with cheers, but with confusion, then awe. The lights went out, and the silence stretched on for what felt like eternity. Then, slowly, over that stillness, Daniel's narration began. We spent decades trying to understand a man who only wanted to give love. We demanded more, louder, brighter, faster, but in the end, he gave us the simplest thing he could, a whisper, a promise that everything he did was an attempt to heal a broken world, even if it broke him to do it. The camera cut to a montage of faces, fans holding candles at vigils, children in hospitals singing his songs, old footage of him visiting orphanages, wildlife sanctuaries, classrooms. Each image was underscored by that same whisper, repeated gently through the mix, like a heartbeat under the music. Tell them I tried to heal them. The credits didn't roll right away. Instead, the screen faded to black for 20 long seconds, complete silence, exactly as Michael had left it that night. And then, at the bottom of the screen, one sentence appeared. "When you hear the silence, listen anyway." The response was immediate. Social media crashed under the weight of emotion. Clips of the whisper replayed across every platform. Fans who had once argued about his legacy now spoke with one voice. For the first time in years, the conversation wasn't about the controversies or the fame or the spectacle. It was about the man, the one who had spent his entire life trying to remind people that love was still possible. Within hours, candlelight vigils formed in dozens of cities. Crowds gathered in squares and parks, holding up speakers and replaying that same final moment over and over again. At 1 a.m. in London, the space outside the O2 Arena, the very place where it had all happened, filled with thousands of people singing softly, "Heal the world, make it a better place." No one organized it. No one led it. It just happened. And when the last note of the song faded, the crowd fell silent. They stood there in absolute stillness, the same stillness Michael had left them with years earlier. No music, no applause, just quiet. And for those who were there, that silence felt like communion, a shared heartbeat between the living and the memory of the man who had once stood on that stage. 2 days after the broadcast, Daniel received a package at his office. It had no return address, just a plain white envelope with his name printed neatly in black ink. Inside was a small flash drive and a folded note. The note read, "This was found in Michael's jacket pocket after the final show. Maybe you'll know what to do with it." Daniel's pulse quickened. He inserted the drive into his laptop, the screen flashing as a single file appeared. Michael_final_message.mov. He clicked play. The video was short, just 15 seconds of handheld backstage footage. Michael stood by the exit ramp, breathing heavily, still glowing from the stage lights. The cameraman whispered, "Mike, are you okay?" Michael smiled faintly. "Yeah," he said. "They heard me." "What did you say out there?" He looked into the camera, not with performance, but with pure exhaustion and peace. "Everything I ever wanted to." He turned, looked toward the light spilling from the stage, and whispered almost to himself, "It's their turn now." Then the clip ended. Daniel sat there for a long time, staring at the frozen frame. Michael's half smile, his eyes soft but resolute. It wasn't just a man saying goodbye. It was a man handing over the torch. The following week, Daniel appeared on a live interview. The host, visibly moved, asked him, "Do you think he knew this would be his last message?" Daniel hesitated, then smiled. "I think he knew it would be his truest one." He leaned forward, voice trembling slightly. He spent his life trying to heal the world through music. But in the end, he realized something deeper. That healing doesn't come from noise or perfection. It comes from presence. From being brave enough to whisper love into the dark, even when no one's listening. The host nodded, unable to respond. The studio was silent. The broadcast cut to black. Weeks later, at a children's hospital in Tokyo, a mural was painted on the wall of the playroom. It showed Michael surrounded by children, reaching out with an open hand. In soft silver letters across the mural were the words, "Tell them I try to heal them." Every day, nurses would see children stop to touch the wall before treatment. So would close their eyes and whisper, "I heard you." For Daniel, life slowed down. He didn't chase another story after the last whisper. He didn't need to. He'd spent half a decade trying to uncover the meaning behind a mystery, only to realize the mystery itself was the meaning. One evening, he returned to the O2 Arena, now years empty. The stage had been dismantled, the seats removed for renovation. He stood on the bare concrete floor where Michael had last performed. He closed his eyes, imagining the crowd, the lights, the sound. He could almost hear the faint echo of that whisper lingering in the rafters. He whispered back softly, "They know now, Michael. They know." Then he smiled, and for a moment the silence around him felt full, like the world itself was breathing. "Tell them I tried to heal them." Those 7 words would echo across generations, not as an ending, but as an anthem of gentleness in a world that rarely listened. For once, the noise had stopped, and in the quiet, everyone finally heard him. The years that followed didn't erase the whisper. They made it eternal. It became more than sound. It became ritual memory language. It lived in candlelight vigils and murals and songs, in quiet moments when people still turned to the sky and mouthed those same words of the night. Tell them I tried to heal them. And in a world that had once drowned Michael Jackson in noise, now the silence he left behind had become the loudest thing of all. It started with the children. Hospitals began playing Heal the World during pediatric recovery sessions. Teachers in underfunded schools used the song as part of empathy lessons, calling it Michael's Promise. In Los Angeles, a foundation formed under his name, providing instruments and art therapy to children who had survived trauma. They called it the Whisper Project. At its first event, thousands of children stood on stage, each holding a small microphone. None of them were plugged in. None of them made a sound. Instead, they stood in a moment of silence, 1 minute long, before bursting into song together. The video went viral overnight. Comments poured in from every corner of the world. He's still healing us. I didn't cry until the silence. He found a way to keep singing through us. In London, the O2 Arena, the place where it all began, installed a permanent memorial near the main entrance. A simple bronze statue of Michael, head bowed, mic in hand. There was no plaque, just one engraved line in his own handwriting. When you hear the music stop, listen anyway. People left flowers and letters there daily. Some came to pray, some to sing, some just to stand in silence. The air around it always seemed to hum faintly, as if the building itself remembered. Every year on the anniversary of his final show, the arena dimmed its lights at 10:47 p.m., the exact minute he had whispered those words. Tens of thousands of fans would gather, holding candles and phones, swaying together in darkness until the screens around the stadium played that moment one more time. His final whisper, carried through the speakers like a breeze through eternity. And without fail, when his voice faded, nobody clapped. Nobody screamed. They listened. Daniel Rios never returned to journalism after the last whisper. He couldn't. He said every story he ever wanted to tell had already been told, and it had ended in a whisper. He lived quietly in California, near the ocean, where gulls scream and waves crash but somewhere between them. He always thought he could hear that voice again. He still received letters, sometimes hundreds in a week, from fans, teachers, doctors, prisoners, children, all thanking him for giving them back the moment the world had misunderstood. One afternoon, he opened a letter from a girl in Rio de Janeiro. She had been born deaf, but had felt vibrations during the documentary when the whisper played through her speaker. I could feel the words, she wrote. They were soft and full of weight. I think that's what love feels like. Daniel cried. He didn't reply. He didn't need to. He kept that letter folded in his journal, alongside a photo of Michael on stage, the one taken seconds before the lights went out. In the years that followed, the whisper transcended fame and fandom. Scholars wrote about it in essays on performance art. Pastors quoted it in sermons. Activists painted it on protest signs beside words like hope and unity. Psychologists used the documentary to teach about empathy and the human need for closure. In art schools, the silence after the whisper was studied as a masterclass in emotional timing, how absence can complete a story. And in every conversation, one truth repeated itself like a heartbeat. Michael Jackson's last words weren't about himself. They were about us. In 2030, on what would have been his 72nd birthday, a global broadcast united cities across 5 continents in a synchronized moment of silence. From Tokyo to Lagos, from New York to Paris, screens around the world dimmed simultaneously. No speeches, no advertisements, just 1 minute of quiet. The footage afterward showed the same image repeated everywhere. Millions of people, children, elderly, fans, skeptics, standing together in a hush, eyes closed, hands over hearts. When the minute ended, a voice spoke through every speaker, soft and timeless. Tell them I tried to heal them. The crowd erupted, not with noise but with tears and shared breath, the kind of release that words couldn't touch. And above it all, the music started again, Heal the World, swelling from the silence like sunrise after a storm. Years later, Naomi Klein would visit the O2 Memorial for the last time. The arena was quieter now, more sacred than commercial. She brought with her an envelope, the original note she found under the stage so many years ago. Let them hear love. She placed it beneath the statue's feet, then whispered. They heard it, Michael. They finally did. A light breeze stirred her hair as she turned to go. Somewhere in the distance, faint and impossibly real, she thought she heard a child's voice singing softly. Time marched forward, but the whisper never aged. It lived in remixes, documentaries, stage tributes, even AI recreations. But the original, unaltered recording was never touched again. It remained locked in the archives under a single nameplate. Michael Jackson, The Last Whisper, original 2009 recording. Visitors to the archive were allowed to listen to it once. They sat in a small, soundproof booth with a single headset, hearing his voice come through the silence. Breath trembling, words faint but unmistakable. Tell them I tried to heal them. Most people cried. Others prayed. A few just smiled and said thank you before walking out wordlessly. Decades later, when technology had changed and most of the world's music lived only in clouds and data streams, the whisper still survived. Not in sound, not in image, but in memory, in how people treated each other, in how they listened more closely when someone was hurting, in how silence became less frightening. It became a phrase passed between generations, parents to children, lovers to each other, teachers to students. Whenever someone reached out with kindness that couldn't be explained, they would just smile and say, that's what he meant. One final image closes the story. An open-air concert 50 years later. A new artist stands on stage barefoot, the crowd of millions glowing with lights. They perform one of Michael's songs, Man in the Mirror, and as the final chorus fades, the artist lowers the mic. The music stops. The world goes silent. Then, into that stillness, the artist whispers, tell them we're still healing. The crowd doesn't cheer. They just listen, and somewhere in the quiet between breaths, they swear they can hear it, that same gentle voice, echoing through time, forever soft, forever human. Tell them I tried to heal them. The whisper that never ends. If you like this story, please subscribe to support this channel.